Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Radio. Today on the show, I released my new NBA Draft Big Board on Tuesday over at Sporting News. You can go check that out. That means it's time to have a Chris Stone episode. He is the guy that we bring on whenever we want to talk about where these players should be ranked in the grand scheme of things in the vacuum. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well. How are you?
I am all right. We were talking beforehand. It's been a hell of a day on Tuesday. For a multitude of political reasons and for a multitude of just general reasons. Because I'm leaving on Wednesday to go to the NBA Draft Combine. My girlfriend has this crazy fundraising event out here in Los Angeles on Wednesday night that I have to go to. I have to help her, have to volunteer on Wednesday and help her out with some of the stuff prepping for that. So it's been like a bit of a crazy few days. Just went and got a haircut, have to do laundry, everything that you do before you travel, basically. I've tried to fit it into the last really 4 hours.
Very nice. You just got to go bald, man, so you can just shave your head by yourself. That's what I do. It's awesome.
I'm not far off, man.
I haven't paid for a haircut in 10 years or something. It's great.
See, here's the thing. Do you have a low forehead or a high forehead?
Well, I have a hairline that makes that not really matter.
But, before your hairline went, do you have a low forehead or a high forehead?
Oh, I don't know. It was pretty low, I think.
Yeah, so,
But it had to go.
My forehead is fucking comically large. So, and that's, without, losing my hair, every goddamn day in the shower. So, going bald, realistically, would involve me looking like I have the biggest goddamn head, in the entire country. So
would you be like Coneheads?
Yes, that's exactly right. And it'd be just an absolute joke. There's no way anyone would ever, have me come on video and, talk about basketball if I looked like that. So, yeah.
Hold on while you can, then.
Yeah, I got to hold on to as much hair as I can. So let's talk about, first, the big board that I released, and then we'll get into some NBA Draft Combine stuff. This will be a preview for that event as well. You flipped through my NBA Draft Big Board here. No changes in the top four. Number 1, Markelle Fultz. Number 2, Jason Tatum. Number 3, Josh Jackson. Number 4, Lonzo Ball. We've talked about that at length. Do you have any new opinions on, what your top 4 looks like?
No, I think our top 4 stayed the same as well. We still have Fultz, Jackson, Ball, Tatum. So it's the same 4 guys, just a different order. And I think that's pretty consistent, other than a few people who maybe would throw Jonathan Isaac up into that top 4.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's my question to you. Do you think that that's kind of a tier, or do you think that Tatum is in a separate tier from the top 3? Because that's kind of an argument that I've been hearing recently as well.
That's interesting. I, for a little while, have kind of thought of Markelle Fultz as his own tier.
Yeah. Would agree with that, for what it's worth.
I honestly, I have Jackson in kind of a tier above Ball and Fultz to me, I guess.
Ball and Tatum, yeah.
Ball and Tatum, excuse me. I have Jackson a little higher than that just because I think that the thing that he could potentially do as a primary initiator on the wing is so rare that's a little more attractive to me. And honestly, I think Ball's a pretty clear number 3, too.
Yeah.
I like those top 3 quite a bit more than Tatum, probably. But that's just, reliant on a belief that I'm not so sure that Tatum is going to become the facilitator that I think he potentially could be.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. Currently, and I'm sure that I will do a tiers podcast as we get further into this NBA draft season, but currently I would say that my top kind of looks like Markelle Fultz in a tier by himself at the top. Tatum, Jackson, Ball in a tier by themselves in the second one. And then kind of the rest of the top 11, I would say. And, I've gotten to the point where I think I'm going to include Zach Collins in that tier, and we can talk about that in a minute. But before we get there, I have moved Jonathan Isaac up on my board from number 8 up to number 5. Do you guys have, what are your feelings on Isaac? Where do you guys have him right now?
So we have Isaac at 6 behind Dennis Smith right now.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Isaac, but I'm not sure. Part of the reason that he's not higher for us is that I'm not entirely sure what his upside looks like. I am not particularly convinced that he can be much of an offensive creator for himself. I think you're looking at somebody who's probably going to be a pretty elite role player, assuming that the jump shot is totally okay. And I think he's obviously going to impact the game defensively. I think you could make some arguments about why he should be higher if you believe that he can fill out the frame, and we're seeing teams go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and could Isaac potentially play some minutes at the 5 for a team in the future if he adds enough weight and the game keeps getting smaller? If that is the case, then I think you can make an argument that his value should be higher than what I currently think it is.
So, yeah, that's a really good question, right? I saw that good friend of the program that we've had on before, John Sharks, wrote that he thinks of Jonathan Isaac and OG Anunoby as future 5s, even in a way. I don't go that far with Isaac, really. I don't know that his body is ever going to be able to handle the beating that 5s take, even in today's NBA. He just doesn't have the frame to where I think he's going to fill out to even 240 pounds.
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
Yeah, I think he's really more 225. Yeah. I think that he's going to be a 225 pound player at his peak. Doesn't really have the shoulders. His body is just skinny, and that's fine. He's put on weight over the years, certainly, but I think he's going to max out at around 225, 230, and it's really tough to play the center position in today's NBA even and be a primary rim protector whenever that's kind of the extent of your size, and it's just tough for me, I think.
I think I agree with you. The other question that I have about him is just how consistent his jump shot will be.
Yes.
In the NBA, and I think that a lot of people who are pretty high on Isaac kind of assume that that's a foregone conclusion that he'll be a good 3-point shooter. But he only shot 35% in college, and while he had really high free throw numbers to start the year, he kind of came back down to earth, I think, and finished around 78%. And so neither of those numbers really give me great confidence that he's going to be a really good shooter in the NBA. And if he's not a really good shooter, he becomes a much tougher piece to fit on offense, because I don't really think he can handle the ball in a way like Jackson or Tatum can.
No, he definitely can't handle the ball like that. I do think that he can at least attack closeouts fluidly, 2 dribbles, stop, and pop, which will be super helpful to him. I think that he's probably going to be confident shooting corner threes initially, and then whether or not he can stretch it out to the 23-foot range, above the break and everything, that's still up for debate, certainly. I like the shot fluidity. I like how it looks. I think that he has a little too much offhand interaction at the top, and I think that can kind of lead to some funky results on his jump shot from time to time. But I think that that's a little bit fixable as well. In terms of the way that I kind of think of him, the way that I'm considering him right now is I'm considering him a high floor prospect because I think he is going to defend immediately in the NBA. He's just so quick and so laterally explosive with his feet for a guy that's 6'10" with a 9-foot plus standing reach, that he's exactly what teams are looking for to cut off penetration from big men. I mean, if you can throw him at the 4 relatively early and he can knock down corner threes, I think he's going to be pretty successful. The main question that I have for him is to derive offensive value. And I mean, I don't think he's done growing offensively yet. 5 years down the road, if you told me that he developed the ability to create shots for himself and became more confident in his skill set, I would be okay, I totally get it. And I think that he will be, he'll be totally fine. And he could even develop into an NBA All-Star. But if you're going to be an elite level role player in today's NBA, you need one of 2 things on offense. If you're going to be a defensive role player, that is. You need to either really be able to shoot at a high level, like Patrick Beverley, for instance, has developed into a really solid 39% 3-point shooter. Or you need to really be able to pass the ball. And, for instance, a Draymond Green or an Andre Iguodala, right? Isaac didn't show that at all this year. He didn't really show the ability to make reads and create for others at Florida State. I do think part of that is the fact that their offense was so ISO heavy and ISO driven that he didn't really get the opportunity to do that. But at the same time, it's a concern, and he needs to kind of show us early in his NBA career if he can make reads and kind of dime guys on the move.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the statement about the system at Florida State does beg some questions about why Isaac wasn't more involved in those isolations. And obviously you can go back to having a couple ball dominant guards that he played with.
Right.
But like if he felt really comfortable creating, he's good enough. I think that they would have given him the ball. But I think the point you raised about his ability to create for others is really important. I've been compiling some numbers for an article that I'm going to write in the future about wing profiles, and I put together a metric to measure creation of unassisted field goal makes and assists per 100 possession, and Isaac among wings in kind of the top 60 or our top 60 is third from the bottom. So he's sandwiched between Tyler Lydon and Devin Robinson, and it's just like neither of those dudes are people that you would ever particularly think of as creators. And so I really think while Isaac is younger and has the potential to grow, he's going to need to show some of that for me to believe that he's going to be much more on offense than a spot-up shooter who attacks closeouts.
Right, and yeah, like I did that chart on the thing I wrote at Vice either last week or 2 weeks ago now, I think, that kind of showed, is Jonathan Isaac anything resembling a guy who's going to create offense for himself, right? And what I did was I added up percentage of possessions finished in pick and roll and post up and in isolation. That's kind of three situations where he is going to be often utilized if he's going to be asked to handle the ball and create in the NBA. His percentage of time in creation situations was 16.1%. That was over 8% lower than even the guy that was second to last among like kind of wingish forward prospects in the last 4 NBA drafts. So that goes back to Aaron Gordon, Jabari Parker, Andrew Wiggins, all the way through to guys like Brandon Ingram, Ben Simmons, Stanley Johnson, Jaylen Brown, like everyone that's in that class.
Right.
So he was 8.3% lower than Aaron Gordon, who was the lowest at that stage. On average, he was about half of what everyone else's was. I think the average was somewhere in like the 32, 33 range. So it's a very large concern that he's never going to create offense for himself, but I do think that he can provide a lot of value defensively and still has the upside to grow into creating for himself at some point.
I think you're exactly on the same page with me on that. Like his defense should be really, really good, just based on his length. It's funny, anytime I do a mock draft and go find a picture of him, like it's impossible to find a photo where he doesn't just look comically long. And that bodes really well for what he can do defensively, I think, in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. Number 6, I have De'Aaron Fox. Number 7, Dennis Smith. Number 8, Malik Monk. Anything there, really? I mean, those 3 guards are all, I think, high upside guards that kind of have their own sets of weaknesses, but could all end up as all-stars in the NBA, and it wouldn't surprise anyone, right?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Nothing about those 3 guys really sticks out or is different to me.
Yeah. Frank Ntilikina at number 9, Lauri Markkanen number 10, Zach Collins at number 11. Like I kind of said, that ends a tier for me. Any kind of thoughts on where you're going? And I think that the place to go here is the Markkanen Collins conversation, because
I was about to say that's one that I've been debating a little bit.
I've really been trying to figure out where I fall on that, because I do think that Collins, based on what we saw this year, might have a little bit more of an upside. But I wonder if we saw Collins in his, absolute peak situation in terms of fit on a roster, whereas we saw Markkanen in a situation that was the farthest thing from peak fit on a roster.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. The debate to me more centers around Collins is, I think, more of a traditional center in what you look for out of modern NBA guys. He can protect the rim. I feel pretty comfortable about him getting out on the perimeter okay. He has some semblance of a jump shot, although it's certainly not anywhere close to being something you should be confident in yet. And he is a really efficient scorer offensively, just in terms of pick and roll. He can post up against switches, etc. And Markkanen is obviously really unique. And you have to figure out, I think you have to be a little more creative in figuring out what you would do with Markkanen on a team, right? If you put Markkanen as a center and kind of sacrifice defensively, is his offense worth it? And I think that there are some situations in which you could say yes, right? I mean, look at like Ryan Anderson playing center for the Rockets and just making them
happening right now on TV.
Yeah, happening right now. Impossible to guard, at least for a team like the Spurs, seemingly so far.
Yeah.
If you did that same thing with Markkanen, who is like the best 7-foot shooting prospect we've probably ever seen, I think that there's a lot of value in that, even though he doesn't really bring a lot of other things to the table like Collins does.
So I got posed this question today from an NBA personnel person that I like and that I trust and that I always have really interesting conversations with. He asked me, do I think Lauri Markkanen will be the best shooter in the NBA at his position immediately upon his entry into the NBA?
Maybe. Yeah.
So I said Dirk, but let's say that's like an emeritus thing where Dirk's only going to be around for like 1 or 2 more years. Do you think that Markkanen, outside of Dirk, steps into the NBA as the best shooting center?
There's nobody that's jumping off the page to me right now that can do the stuff Markkanen does. So maybe there are people who can match Markkanen theoretically in like spot up open jump shooting, but Markkanen offers so many different ways to get his shot off, right? Like I don't think there's a 7-foot center in the NBA who can shoot off the dribble like him. I don't think that there's a 7-foot center in the NBA who could run off of a screen and catch and shoot like Markkanen can.
Right. Like even Channing Frye really can't do that.
Yeah, yeah. And in that way, I think you would be hard-pressed to find somebody who would be better than him, even in the short term.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking just like pure catch and shoot, I think like Pau Gasol is probably up there in terms of being able to knock down shots. Yeah.
Just in terms of like, can you stand here and shoot a jump shot? Can you pick and pop or whatever? But like Markkanen offers you so many different...
You can literally run your center off of screens.
Yeah, and like I understand there's already problems with centers attempting to guard other 3-point shooting centers just because they don't want to come out that far. Like, how many centers in the league have experience chasing a guy around a screen?
Yeah, none.
Basically nobody.
It'd be pretty funny.
Yeah. So the debate for me between those two big guys, and I do think it's a fair one because I'm really impressed with Collins, is whether or not Markkanen's offensive value, if you exert some creativity to figure out how he fits in a system, and I think he probably ultimately will end up better as a 5 than a 4, just with how things are downsizing. If that is more valuable than kind of the traditional, the now traditional mold that Collins fits a little better.
I really want the team that drafts Lauri Markkanen to end up with Serge Ibaka. Like,
that'd be fun.
I would just really want to see that, I guess, because I think it could actually work well. Like I feel like if you used Ibaka, and this has been the archetype for Ibaka forever, right? Put him with like a low, like a feet to the ground, back to the basket center, who doesn't really protect the rim well, and let Ibaka kind of make up for that.
Right.
It hasn't really worked out in the manner that like everyone thought it would, especially since Ibaka got hurt. A few years ago, I think he had like the knee. Was it like a knee? Was it torn meniscus or like tendinitis or something like that? He hasn't had the same bounce since then, and he's just generally kind of thickened up his body as he's aged. And I'm not saying like he's not in shape. I'm saying like as he's aged, he's just generally gotten bigger. I don't know. Like I think it's an idea at least. It's not like something that will be practical, but it's an idea at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on. Number 12, Terrence Ferguson. I'm really excited to see him at the NBA Draft Combine. So let's kind of jump into this now that we're getting into players that will actually be at the Combine this year and probably working out in some way, at least doing athletic testing. Terrence Ferguson is a guy that is going to test out of the gym in terms of, vertical jump, quickness, anything like that. He's going to be awesome. How much stock do you ascribe to guys testing out of the gym?
So I think athleticism obviously matters a ton because it gives you a canvas that you can work from. With Ferguson, my concern is that we have data that says he wasn't a particularly good basketball player this year, which I think is putting it nicely.
He was a little bit better than I think he got, like, than the P. Like, he had, like, a PER of, like, 5.3 or something.
Yeah. All of his numbers are bad. Like,
yeah. Well, no, I actually would not go that far. He was in the top 10 in Australia in the NBL in spot-up points per possession, which is
okay, that's fair.
Kind of exactly what he is, right? Like, he's a 3-and-D prospect, full stop. He is, like, the 3-and-D Zach LaVine in terms of, like, hyper-athleticism. Is going to be able to dunk, he's going to be able to shoot, but he's way better defensively but doesn't have as much creation skill, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And given his position, I think that athleticism matters a ton just because,
right.
Wing scarcity matters and finding guys who can fit that role are important, even if we aren't really entirely sure what they are yet. But to contrast him with someone else who will obviously test well athletically in Hamidou Diallo, I think I am slightly more interested in Diallo, if only because we haven't had time to nitpick his game, which is a little weird because he's, similar to Ferguson in that respect, in that, there's still a lot of skill that needs to be developed there.
Yeah.
But I think once we get to see players, we get to pick on the negatives a little bit more. And so for Ferguson, even if he tests off the charts, there's still, I think, concerns from another year of basketball that we don't have with Diallo.
Is Ferguson a little bit younger than Diallo?
I think slightly. Maybe by like a couple of months.
Yeah.
Ferguson's like one of the youngest players in the draft.
Right, yeah. Like he could still play U19 this summer if he wanted to, if there was a U19 event. So yeah, no, Terrence Ferguson's going to be a really interesting prospect to me. In terms of how I evaluate those numbers, I kind of think of them from the stance of, okay, does this guy utilize his athleticism on the basketball floor? So the example I always use there is Cody Zeller tested out of the gym. I think he had like a 40-inch vertical leap, but he doesn't really utilize that. He plays, low to the ground. He is a super quick player. He definitely moves and covers ground really well, and he uses his athleticism that way, and he uses it fluidly, but he doesn't really use the explosiveness that his testing numbers would provide. So ultimately it does all come back to the tape for me. Sometimes I will give a bit more added credence to upside if there is some sort of number that stands out, right? Like, so Pat Connaughton had that bullshit 46-inch vertical leap or whatever because they mismeasured they mismeasured his standing reach. So like, whenever you look at that number, yes, we knew Pat Connaughton was athletic. We didn't really know he was, even 44-inch vertical leap athletic, which is, I think, right around where he was probably. So I think, like, there's a chance that guy could add a little bit more to his game, right?
Yep. I'm concerned mostly just in the fact that it gives them a baseline to work from.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Let's talk about the rest of this. We got Luke Kennard at 13, Justin Patton 14, Jarrett Allen 15, John Collins 16. Kind of a big glut of big men after Kennard there. All three of whom have their own concerns. Patton, a guy that you have to really kind of get to know him. You have to get to know whether or not you like the body enough to develop in the way that you want it to. Jarrett Allen, there are some concerns that he doesn't love basketball, really. Like he needs to, kind of focus in on his game a little bit more and, what is his upside if he's not going to work like crazy at his game. And then 16, John Collins. Collins was one of the worst defensive good basketball players this year in the country, I would say.
I think we're pretty far off on Collins, to be honest. In large part because of that. But
the thing here, let's talk about them. Let's talk about him real quick. So John Collins, the reason I like John Collins is he's freshman age, and he just dropped 20 points and 10 rebounds a game in the ACC, which was the best conference basically in college basketball history, in my opinion, outside of those Big East years in the early 2000s. So, to me, I look at what he was able to do, and I can't get past the production. I know that he has short arms. I know that he has terrible defensive instincts, but the guy is just going to get buckets. He's going to get buckets. He's going to crash the rebound. He's going to play hard as shit, and he's going to get you production.
Yeah. So what do you think his role is in the NBA? Like, do you think he comes off of the bench as kind of a power forward type that goes and gets buckets, or do you think he's like a small ball center? That's the thing that really messes with
all
me.
Of the above, yes.
Okay. I just don't really know where I see him fitting. Like, short arms and not a ton of rim protection is tough for him as a small ball center.
The way that you make it work is that he's a guy that's going to be more dependent on his teammates than other players are, right? Like, you're going to need to fill around him with some sort of shooting, and you're going to need, and maybe not. I mean, he knocked down some 18-footers this year. Like, you could theoretically just play him next to a weak side rim protecting 4 that doesn't shoot like crazy, and you might be okay. Yeah. If he can extend it out and be a consistent guy from like 18 feet. But having said that, what you can do with him is you can just put him on the floor and he's going to produce, I think. If you're 19 years old and you're putting up those kind of numbers in the ACC, I mean, the more that people do like analytic numbers on him, I think, and the more that like models come out, the more I think that he's going to come out like really, really highly.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true just because he put numbers on the stat sheet. I think that will be reflected really well in those models. He's just someone to me, and I think this is something I've started to think about more, who, like you were just saying, requires a certain fit. And those players, to me, become more difficult to project. So, for example, it's a reason why I like Dennis Smith slightly more than De'Aaron Fox, right? De'Aaron Fox can be a good player even if he doesn't have a jump shot, but that becomes a more difficult team to build around than a point guard who can have the ball and definitely attack and probably shoot a little bit.
Yeah.
And Collins, in some of the same ways, has some of those restrictions where it just is, like you said, he's going to be so reliant on what's around him versus just kind of being a plug-and-play piece like some of those other big guys. Like I think Patton can be, or I think Jared Allen can be.
Okay, I'm going to give you some John Collins numbers here.
Okay.
29.
They're all insane.
So, yeah, conference per 40 minutes. So even throw out their non-conference. Conference per 40-minute numbers. 29.9 points per game, 13.7 rebounds, 2.4 blocks, 67.2 true shooting percentage, 37.1 PER, turnover rate at 11.4, defensive rebounding rate super high at 23 for a guy that's super skinny. Killer offensive rebounder at 16%. He's just going to create. I feel like he's just going to create havoc on the basketball floor. Like if he's bigger Kenneth Faried, that has a ton of value, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Let's go back to Allen and Patton, though. Which one of those two guys do you prefer?
So we have Allen slightly higher right now. Mm-hmm. I worry that that's a reflection of Patton playing the second half of the season without a point guard. Because I think early on I would have had Patton higher. Sure. And we did have Patton higher. And once Patton lost a point guard and Creighton really basically just went to play 2 shooting guards and didn't really have that individual creator, it made it, I think, so much more difficult for Patton to fit in offensively, because I do think Patton offensively is at least a really good rim runner. He's really excellent when he gets out in transition. And I think offensively he's ready to contribute more so far than Allen is, probably. Mm-hmm. But Allen's physical tools are just a little bit better, in my opinion, obviously, with like the way longer wingspan. And I think they have pretty similar block numbers, but Allen has the tools to probably make those work a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that if you made me regret one thing on this board, it was that I had Justin Patton at 14, because I really don't think he's that like awesome.
But after you hit 11, and this kind of fits with your tier thing, like after that, but like it takes me a long time to find another tier. Right.
So like 17, I have OG Anunoby, who is coming off of a knee surgery that like no one really has a ton of details on. Right. 18, I have Donovan Mitchell, who I like as a prospect. I like in terms of his work ethic. I know he's going to defend. I know he's going to work hard at improving his game. How good is he right now? I'm not entirely sure. Number 19, I have Justin Jackson, who the advanced numbers are not great on. Number 20, I have Jawun Evans, who, I got to tell you, the first iteration of this big board, I had him at 14. I'm starting to get more and more confident with Jawun Evans.
He's awesome. I wrote about him last week, and just everything he did as an offensive play. It's crazy to me that he led the number one offense in college basketball.
Yes.
And UCLA was 2 or 3, but you had Lonzo and TJ Leaf, and look at all of the players that you surrounded Lonzo Ball with, and then realize that Evans had the number one offense in college basketball, and most NBA draft people probably couldn't name who the second best player on their team was.
Jeffrey Carroll, man. I love Jeffrey Carroll.
No, I know.
I bet that most people couldn't name number 3, because you know who number 3 was?
I think it's Phil Forte, but I have a special place in my heart for Phil Forte.
You're goddamn right, it's the homie Phil Forte.
Yeah.
But seriously, Mitchell Solomon played half of their minutes this season.
Yeah,
Lucas
and he's
Gasol,
really bad.
Lucas Gasol played 17% of their minutes this season. Yeah, they had one guy on the floor over 6'6" most of the time.
Yeah, Phil Forte is a 5'10", slightly chubby shooting guard who was basically at Oklahoma State because he was Marcus Smart's best friend.
Yes, that's 100% right. Phil Forte is the Phil Kessel of college basketball.
Yeah, that's a great comparison.
The bet. I love that dude. So Jawun Evans this year, Jawun Evans shot 38% from 3. He got to the line at an awesome clip. He drew 6.5 fouls per 40 minutes. He had a 44.1 assist rate, which was 3rd in the entire country. He had a 53.3 true shooting rate, but that's a concern. No one doubts that that's not a concern. And a lot of it comes from his inability to finish at the rim, right?
Yep.
That's his separating skill. That is going to be his swing skill. If he finishes at the rim, he is going to be a potential all-star level point guard.
Yeah, I don't think that is a stretch at all. If he can figure out a way to finish at the rim, his offense will be ridiculous. I do wish he had taken more than 135 three-point attempts in 2 seasons. I feel pretty confident about the jump shot, but the lack of volume is kind of annoying.
Right.
And I think most of it shifts and hinges on the quality of that 2-point percentage.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree fully with you on this. I guess that my question is, so you look at his Ken Pom similarity score. Do you know who the most similar player he was to last year was?
No. And I love these things. They're my favorite.
It was Cameron Payne in 2015.
Yeah, that's so bad.
But I like Jawun Evans a lot more than I like Cameron Payne because I trust his pick and roll instincts a little bit more. I trust his thick frame more. He's smaller, but he's thicker. He's stouter. I think he's going to be able to take more of a beating. And then I trust the vision more. I think he dimes guys in a much better way than Cam Payne ever did.
I agree. And we should also point out that Chris Paul is the 3rd comp.
Yes.
For him. So, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. That at the rim thing is obviously a problem. I wrote in the piece that I said that Jawun Evans is the player that people think De'Aaron Fox is, in that he is a high-volume, low-efficiency guy at the rim when Fox is actually really good at the rim. And Evans is the one who kind of, I think, obviously has those struggles.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
I think we have him 23.
Yeah, I think if you made me guess, and I think that part of the reason I kept him a little bit lower this time is that I wanted to see his numbers at the combine because I wanted to see what he tested at athletically because I don't really have a great feel for his athleticism. I think he's going to be elite in terms of quickness, but I don't have a great feel for it, I guess.
Yeah, I think
he's so much of a technician,
He is. And so much of his work inside of the arc and trying to score at the rim was really trying to draw fouls.
Yeah.
And I wonder how that, might change if he's better athletically than I think he might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's worth mentioning too, he was this bad at the rim whenever Oklahoma State was the 6th best 3-point shooting team in the country.
Yep.
So that's a concern. I mean, he had Jeffrey Carroll out there bombing at 44%. He had Phil Forte at 42%. Leighton Hammonds was 6'8" and could bomb from deep. The floor was spaced adequately, and he was bad at the rim. So It's a concern for sure. If you made me guess, though, he will be higher in my next big board. I really believe in Jawun Evans.
And I think you can make just an easy case, given that that set above him is a bunch of bigs. Yeah. And given kind of how plentiful bigs are, I think it's easy to just say, like, these guys are pretty good, but Evans fits a position of need for the league and should be higher just on that basis alone.
Yep. Next on my board, I had Harry Giles, which will lead into another combine preview question. I think Harry Giles is the most to gain or lose at this year's NBA draft combine. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's 100% true, right? It all depends on how he tests medically.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean...
And to be honest, like, I'm not 100% sure that, like, his representation will have him go through the medical gamut.
I wouldn't.
But, like, it's really complicated, right? So, like, the NBA, if you're going to go to the combine, they kind of force you to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's, like, any sort of...
enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know exactly how that works, but, like, if I was him and I was his representation, I would be trying to get him out of that because I wouldn't want all 30 teams to have my guy's medical reports.
Yeah, I'll rephrase as, if I had the option to not have him go through medical testing, I would definitely not have him go through medical testing.
Yeah. So
because so much of his stock depends just on what's there. Because I think otherwise you can say, like, he didn't have a good season this year, but I think that there were some flashes where you saw what he could potentially be. I don't think he was in the best situation at Duke to maximize what we could potentially see, right? He was never going to get on the floor ahead of Emile Jefferson, and once they figured out their best lineup was Jason Tatum at the 4, he just wasn't going to find the minutes. And I really think that him missing the beginning of the season and all that practice time made it much more difficult for him to find a role, on that team.
Yeah, no, like you said, that's the biggest key to me. Like, he wasn't there early in the year. If he never has that third knee surgery, I wonder if this year would have been wholly different. But then there's the flip side of that. How does he test athletically while he's here? Does he kind of, blow up athletically like we think he's capable of, given that we saw in high school he was this unbelievable athlete? Like, or is he tangibly changed athletically from the knee surgeries? I don't have an answer to that either. I don't have an answer in terms of if he's ever going to feel confident in his knees. Like, not
I think there were moments you saw, like I remember against Miami, he had the second jump where it was just like, okay, that's not something you see from a player his size very often.
Yep.
But then there are other times when you watch him try to get out on the perimeter, and I think the point about trusting his knees is appropriate, where he just didn't really look comfortable moving laterally like he used to.
And that guy used to destroy laterally, and he had no chance to guard pick and rolls this year.
Yeah.
So, yep, I agree with that. Let's go to Hamidou Diallo at number 22. Another good combine discussion here. He decided, or he was told earlier this week by the NBA, he does not have to play in the 5-on-5. If I was him and the difference between going to the combine and not going to the combine was the NBA was going to force me to play 5-on-5 if I was there, I genuinely would not have gone to the combine if I was him.
Yeah, why would you? I mean, I think with him, you want to maintain as much of a mystique as possible.
Yes.
Because that's look, we've been through all of the things that we don't like about other people's games, and that becomes easier to do when you have more film on them. With Diallo, you can say, here's the stuff that we think he can potentially be good at. He is functionally, based on what we know, a pretty blank canvas.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, I feel the same way about Terrence Ferguson.
Yeah. And adding that tape to what we know could be potentially damaging for him. And so I would not play 5-on-5. I would go test athletically, look ridiculous like he's going to do in those tests, and, go from there.
Yeah, so I guess that where I come down on all of this is we know he's going to be something like 6'5" in shoes with a 6'10" wingspan. We know that he's going to jump like 42 inches and, just ball out in terms of all of the athletic testing. That should be the last taste in scouts' minds before we get to workouts, not the other stuff. And yeah, I guess that like on some level he is kind of still trying to figure out if he's going to stay in the draft. And by getting not only does that lack of information kind of make him a mystery to NBA executives, but even on his end, it does create a little bit more uncertainty, right? In terms of, am I making the right decision? Do I think that this is the right call for me? I still think it's right to not go through a potentially bad situation at the combine for him, because he's just not someone, he does not have good tape to counteract what could be a bad set of games against legitimate college basketball all-star talent.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
So let's kind of talk about the guys testing their waters in this draft. Who is the guy that's playing 5-on-5 that you like the most?
Let me do a quick scroll through really fast.
So while you're doing that, I can talk. So I have Semi Ojeleye at number 25 on my board.
Yep.
He is still trying to decide if he is going to, stay in the NBA draft, go back to SMU, and potentially be an All-American next year. To me, he's going to be the best player in the 5-on-5. The way that he's able to switch screens, the way that he's become such a knockdown shooter. His 2-foot athleticism, I think, is going to play well in a setting where you get up and down the floor a little bit more. He's going to get some space to leap. He's going to get some space to kind of show off that. I think that he's probably going to put himself in a place to where he's going to be able to go, because he's so good defensively. He is a functional shooter offensively, that it's going to play well in a setting like this.
Yeah, I think he's probably kind of just flipping through this list really quickly. Probably my answer too, because of most of the reasons that you just said. The other people I'm obviously most interested in, just from a team building perspective and stuff, are all of the wings who will be playing 5-on-5.
Mm-hmm.
So like Rawley Hawkins, even Svi Mikhailuk, I think will, in a free-form game like that, look much better than he probably did at Kansas when he was pigeonholed into being a spot-up shooter. So those are the kind of guys that I think I'm most interested in watching, who are still trying to figure out what they're going to do. But Ojeleye, in terms of position on our big board, is certainly the highest of those guys.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about Svi. So Svi is not in my top 60 right now. It would be kind of a bad look, though, if he ends up being balling out again in the 5-on-5 here, after Sheck Diallo did the same thing last year and got himself drafted and got 2 guaranteed years.
Yeah. Well, Sheck Diallo, I mean, that dude was just a different position, right? Diallo
was certainly.
He couldn't remember how to run plays at Kansas, which was his problem. And putting him in a free-flowing environment like the 5-on-5 at the Combine was so advantageous to all of the things that he does well and exposed none of the things that he did poorly. With Mikhailuk, I think it's a little bit different, because I think that the role that he played at Kansas as a spot-up shooter is different than the role that he could potentially play in the NBA as kind of a secondary creator who can handle the ball, run some pick and roll, stuff that made him an attractive recruit coming out of high school.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that that's a really great point. Who do you think is going to gain the most from playing 5-on-5? Because I think Semi Ojeleye kind of has a certain cap on his stock, being 22 years old, being more of a role NBA player. Do you think there's anyone playing in the 5-on-5 that could shoot up from being number 45 on your board to being considered for the first round?
Maybe Tony Bradley is the best answer here.
Is Bradley playing 5-on-5?
He's marked that it's on Draft Express.
Okay. I honestly wasn't sure.
Yeah, I don't know if he will for sure, but that's somebody who I think could potentially put themselves in the first-round conversation with a really big performance in 5-on-5.
Yeah.
Good athlete, great rebounder, just wasn't in a position to get a ton of minutes this year because, North Carolina had that excellent front court. And I think that he's somebody who could potentially put together a big game, assuming, he plays like he's marked on here.
Yeah. The guys that I kind of look at there is that wing class that you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
The guys like Rawley Hawkins, I think. I have Hawkins at 51 right now. I think he could really help himself. Wesley Iwundu from Kansas State, he could really help himself. 6'7", long, defensive athlete, has some ability to even run some offense, as a lead guard, which is really interesting. The key for him, obviously, is going to be the jump shot. Dwayne Bacon, 6'6" athlete, 6'10" wingspan. If he shows an improved 3-point shot, I think that would really help. Devin Robinson is a guy I have at 47 on my board. Interesting player, always been inconsistent. Not going to be able to show off more consistency with him being just in a 2-game setting in 5-on-5. But if he plays well and kind of shows off his athleticism, I think he could jump into the first-round conversation. Then Derek White, I think, is my guy that I love. I love Derek White's game unconditionally. He does everything well on the basketball floor.
Yeah, I think that those are all good answers. If I were to add 2 more names who are kind of those wing guys who maybe can create a little of offense, it would be Dylan Brooks and PJ Dozier.
I have them at 60 and 61 on my board for what it's worth.
Yeah, so I think both of those guys could potentially take a decent jump if, like a Wundu, they get some opportunities to have the ball in their hands, run a little bit of offense, and show maybe. I mean, Brooks obviously showed a ton of creation ability, I think, in Oregon. But if they get some opportunities to do that against, elite athletes that they would face in those 5-on-5 games, that could be really valuable for their stock, in my opinion.
So let's also talk about So I have Monte Morris at number 28 on my board. I have Frank Mason at number 31 on my board. I love both of those guys because I think the most important skill beyond just quickness and athleticism for a point guard in today's NBA is the ability to shoot off the dribble. And both of those guys have really, really shown that skill over the course of the last 4 years. Let's talk about the 3 guys that are kind of, on the fence in terms of whether or not, well, I mean, one of these guys isn't. He's in the NBA draft, but on the fence in terms of if they're going to stay in the draft and in terms of skill set to translate to the NBA. So I have Frank Jackson at number 51, Edmund Sumner at number 53, Frank Jackson at number 52, Edmund Sumner at number 53, Andrew Jones number 56. Is there one of those guys that you like more than the others?
I don't really like any of them, to be super honest. If I were, I guess, picking one of the 3, it might be Sumner, just because he's a little bigger than Jones, and I think offers you some of the similar skill sets of just fast point guard who can't really shoot it yet.
Yeah.
I'm not a big Frank Jackson fan in terms of his ability to create a ton of offense. I think he's like a 6'4" shooting guard.
Yeah, can we talk about him real quick? I
Sure.
saw that, I think, is one of the ESPN guys, and I don't think it was Goodman, because knowing Jeff, I don't think he would say this, said that they think Frank Jackson could go in the first round.
No way.
I mean, I'm not going to say no way, because
but
he's just turned 19, and he's a really good kid, but what does he do? That's a question, to be honest. I don't know.
I mean, the best thing that he does is he shoots it pretty well.
Right.
And you can find a lot of those guys who have better physical profiles than him. I honestly wonder how much of his decision is shaped by whether or not Trayvon Duval is going to Duke.
Well, I think it's a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, I've seen a decent number of people suggest that it's the reverse, that Jackson's decision in the NBA draft will have an effect on whether or not Duval goes to Duke.
Which
and
is
I think
crazy pants.
Yeah, I think that it is significantly more in the opposite direction, which is that it seems, based on all accounts that I've read, likely that Duval is going to Duke, and that really decreases the opportunities I think that Jackson will have.
I don't know. Beyond maybe shoot, I don't think there's a single thing that Frank Jackson does better on a basketball floor than Trayvon Duval.
Yeah. So,
I guess my thing with Frank Jackson is a lot of people hold on to this idea of athleticism with Jackson, right?
Sure.
I think he won his year's slam dunk contest at McDonald's, right? He is a really good high leaper off of 2 feet, but he doesn't really play with that,
yeah.
His athleticism isn't functional on the basketball floor, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And this goes back to something you were saying earlier about translating your athleticism onto the floor. And
right.
I think it's, if you're an athletic guy who has the ball in his hands pretty often, you should be averaging more than 2.7 assists per 40 minutes because you should be using your athleticism to break down defenses and find open guys and drive and kick. And that's just not something he does. He just goes and finds a shot and he shoots it pretty well. And, that's a thing. But, he's not Malik Monk when it comes to doing that thing. And so, I'm not really that interested in that thing.
Yeah, like Edmund Sumner and Andrew Jones are hyper quick twitch athletes who can get into the lane when they want because they have really quick first steps. Frank Jackson, I would guess, will test better than Andrew Jones, but he doesn't play with the same athleticism.
Yeah, exactly. I think of those three guys, I think I like Sumner the most just because of the size, and I think he does a lot of the similar things to Andrew Jones, but in a bigger body.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Michigan guys here, because I think that what's going to happen with DJ Wilson and Mo Wagner is interesting. Mo Wagner got a lot of attention in the NCAA tournament because Chad Ford put him at like 22 on his big board for some ungodly reason and tried to act like general managers were telling him he would go in the top 25 if he came out.
Sure.
I don't know who he was talking to. Maybe it was the general manager who had not watched Mo Wagner all year. Maybe, I don't know. But like Mo Wagner was a really good offensive player this year who can shoot the basketball, but I don't know what he does beyond that translates to the NBA, because he's going to get his ass kicked on the offensive glass. He's going to get his ass kicked defensively.
Yes.
And like he generally, I get that he's 19 years old, but like there's just so much he needs to do to get to the point where he is a worthwhile first round pick to me.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big man who had a defensive rebound percentage of 15.3%, which, like, that's bad. So,
by the way, what was Bam Adebayo's this year?
Somewhere around 15-point-something%, which is why I don't really like Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, so Bam's was 17.2, which is terrifying.
Yeah. I watched Michigan in person 4 games in a row. I think 3 games in a row during the Big Ten tournament when they were on their run. They were super awesome, really fun. I loved the last podcast you did. I think you shouted out Derek Walton Jr., which is awesome because that dude is a stud. I came away thinking that DJ Wilson was an intriguing prospect because of his athleticism, his ability to shoot it. I did not come away with any of those same thoughts about Mo Wagner.
Yeah,
which I think probably says something.
Yeah, like I get that sometimes you kind of got to go off of the information that executives are telling you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, nothing beats common sense in this industry. The more that you just kind of have a scouting eye and just like understanding the way that the NBA game is going to go. Like and we'll go back to John Sharks, who I think is really, 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 really smart whenever it comes to basketball. I don't know that John talks with like a lot of NBA executives, but he has one of the better eyes that I've seen in terms of just kind of understanding the way that the game is going, the future of basketball, and calling out the guys that are interesting. Now, I think John, and I'll talk to John about this at some point, but like I think that he takes it a little bit far, like with Jonathan Isaac playing the 5 regularly and OG Anunoby playing the 5, but I also know not to put that past him because he's so often correct, right?
Right.
Like John is awesome at this. So where I kind of go with this is like when I watch Mo Wagner, I don't know what he does other than shoot the ball.
Yep, I totally agree. I assume you like DJ Wilson quite a bit more.
I like DJ Wilson quite a bit more. Better athlete, obviously, better body for the NBA. Shooting the basketball, I still wonder if he is a 38% three-point shooter or if he's something a little bit less. Movement-wise, I don't know how quick twitch he is laterally.
I don't think very.
Yeah. Like, I don't look at him and say, like, he's going to be a shutdown, like, guy who can switch on to players and take a couple slides and switch back.
Yep.
I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that. He does some interesting stuff, blocking shots around the rim, particularly from the weak side, which is nice. But you're kind of taking a gamble with DJ Wilson, right? Like, you're kind of taking a gamble that he can shoot the basketball, that some of the stuff that he showed off in terms of handle is going to translate into the half court, creating some offense that way off closeouts, and that eventually he might be able to continue to improve his quickness. But I like that gamble more than I like Mo Wagner.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I would like Wilson significantly more. I don't think Wagner's in our top 60 right now.
I'm at number 58.
And Wilson certainly is.
35,
he's at least a little bit intriguing to me because of his ability to shoot, block a few shots. He's just a really, watching him in person, you kind of get a different feel for the game, and he's just a really confident player. And I think that translates in some ways that maybe we can't necessarily quantify. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to see. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Let's kind of just run through the end of my board, I guess, because there's one particular guy that I want to talk about. So we stopped at 22. I have Isaiah Hartenstein at 23, will not be at the Combine. 24, I have Bam Adebayo, which, again, you brought up the defensive rebounding rate, and that's the scariest thing about his game to me, obviously. 25, Ojale, we've talked about. 26, Rodion Crooks, who is not going to be at the Combine, still at Barcelona. Number 27, TJ Leaf. I'm starting to wonder if I have him a little bit low, just given who's above him in terms of big men.
If it makes you feel better, we have him lower.
Well, it's not even like I feel bad for having him at 27, but looking at who's above him, I feel more confident that TJ Leaf will at least have an NBA career than I do Jared Allen will have an NBA career.
Yeah, that's fair. I think if I were to make adjustments based on that fact, I would probably move up more wings and guards and just take that glut of bigs and move them down.
Yep. And to be honest, I think at some point, I think that's where I'm going with my board, basically.
Yeah.
As I continue to adjust. I have Josh Hart at 28.
Big fan.
Love Josh Hart. Number 29, I have Monte Morris. We've kind of talked about the point guard class. I think I'm generally higher on the point guard class than most people are in this draft. I have, something like 7 or 8 point guards, depending on how you qualify Frank Ntilikina. In my first round right now, or in my top 31, I'm sorry. Counting Frank Mason at 31. So I generally love what this class can do in terms of handling the ball. Number 30 is Ike Anigbogu for me.
Yeah. I think we have him 33, 34, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so he's going to go higher than 30.
I agree.
I don't really get it. And I watched him live all year.
I mean...
Let me rephrase.
Yeah.
I get it, but, there's a lot to be afraid of.
Yeah, there's a ton that he's going to have to figure out.
Everything.
I just popped open his synergy numbers. It does not help that he was in the 9th percentile in post-up scoring, which is atrocious. But if you were hoping to get something out of him, right, it's that he'll be able to be a pick-and-roll guy and block some shots. And, maybe he does that in time. I slotted him in my last mock draft, I think, 19 to the Hawks, which I think is at least intriguing. Maybe he gets a year under Dwight Howard to, figure some stuff out, and then I don't think he would be ready to play for it the next year, but, that's the stuff he's going to have to learn how to do, right? Block shots, rebound, run pick and roll.
Yeah. I mean, the footwork is interesting, I think. The concern I have is that he's a good athlete in terms of first leap and second leap, but he's a big body that is 18 years old, and I wonder how he's going to fill out long term. This is a guy that has already had, injury questions throughout his high school and even his year at UCLA.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm not super into him as a prospect, and I think maybe we talked about this a little bit the last time I was on with you, but figuring out those prospects at a position like center is a lot less interesting to me than figuring out a project at a wing spot say, Terrence Ferguson or Hamidou Diallo.
Yep.
Because you can find someone who can replicate most of what Anigbogu can do without some of those concerns that they would be a flame out.
Right.
Bam Adebayo, for all of his faults, can probably give you a lot of what Anigbogu is going to give you down the line.
Right.
That seems fair.
And what I would say about that is I believe Bam's a year older than Ike is.
Sure.
but he just has so much more game. Like,
right.
Like he can dribble twice and like not lose the ball, and he can at least potentially knock down a 12 to 14 footer in his career. And like his lateral quickness is not outstanding for a big man, but it's good. It's really good, I would say. With Ike, I have a lot of questions, I guess, about the way that that's going to go. Just what does he do? How does he create an impact offensively if he's not 3 feet away from the rim?
I don't know that he can, and that's a problem. Especially, I mean, that just restricts, again, so much of what you're able to build into your team. It requires you to play, essentially 4 shooters around him, which makes it more difficult, for you to build a roster and put those players together.
Right. Like the rolling big men of today have to either be like Marcin Gortat, but Marcin Gortat has an elite skill in that he might be the best screen setter or, most illegal screen setter in the NBA.
Maybe. That might belong to Kelly Olynyk, though.
He's up there,
depending on what side of that series you're on.
But I feel like Gortat gets away with so much more than Olynyk does.
That's just because Kelly Oubre's not there to push Gortat.
That's true. Well, because also no one's going to be there to push Gortat because
no.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't mess with those like 33-year-old dudes from the Eastern Bloc. But like Gortat has an elite skill in that he's an elite screen setter.
Yes.
Tyson Chandler had an elite skill in that he was maybe the best athlete at center.
Yep.
Who are some of the other like best like quote unquote pick and roll rolling big men? Like Cody Zeller is really good at it.
Yeah.
And Cody has elite level quickness.
Currently, would you put Clint Capella up there?
Yes, but Clint I guess is Ike's like best case scenario, right?
Yeah, probably.
And I don't like. I still like him not super duper high on him. I guess like he does a lot really well, certainly, but I'm not like wild high on him.
I agree.
Like there seems to be like some sort of like massive discussion about him as like this awesome player, and I'm just like, okay.
I mean, he's a nice piece. I don't know. It just feels like finding role guys who can go dunk the ball is not super hard.
So, yeah, I've pulled up the screen assist leaders this year in the NBA. So, Gortat's number 1, Rudy Gobert number 2, best defensive center in the NBA, we'll say.
Absolutely.
Zeller number 3, DeAndre Jordan number 4, probably now the best athlete at center in the NBA.
Yes.
Tristan Thompson number 5, elite level lateral quickness, one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA.
Yep.
Tyson Chandler number 6, we've talked about him. Andre Drummond number 7. Andre is, again, like kind of just a freak athlete in a way that Ike is a really good athlete, but not Drummond either.
Yeah, and I think Drummond more skilled at the age that Ike was.
Right, and also probably, at least last year, he was the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. Probably wasn't quite that this year, but yeah. So Mason Plumlee is next on this list. Plumlee was obviously like kind of a funky player because of how Portland operates their offense. And then Dwight Howard, number 10. Dwight Howard, one of the best athletes we've ever seen at center. Even though he's not really that anymore, he like kind of learned how to do it at a younger age.
Yeah. So, until like the back gave out.
Right, the back eventually gave out, and that's a problem that Atlanta has now. Even though, again, Dwight was a really effective basketball player this year, and I think
he's still totally fine. Even he has a bunch of faults, but whatever.
Yeah. So like, you need to, if you're going to be like a screen and roll big man in today's NBA, or like Steven Adams. Is Steven Adams like another high case scenario for Ike? But like Steven has like the personality stuff that Steven Adams has.
Yeah, like I was just thinking, I was like, how can I draw some difference in the way that the two of them play defense? Because like Steven Adams is a crazy man, and Ike doesn't seem like that.
Well, he's a crazy man in terms of physicality. He embraces physicality, but he's also like a hyper intelligent person too. And I'm not saying that like Ike is dumb or anything, but like Steven Adams is hyper smart and like whip quick and just kind of like you can even notice it just in conversations with him, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's where the difference comes with him too. So like, I don't know. I think that the margin for error for a guy like Ike is super low, and his potential upside, unless you think he is like this maybe all defense team member, isn't high enough for me, I guess.
I think I fully agree with that assessment. There's a reason I think that there are a significant number of bigs higher than him who I think offer at least a glimpse into similar skill sets.
So, like, you've mentioned Jared Allen setting really bad screens before.
Yeah.
How much does that concern you about Jared Allen's game? Just kind of while we're talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I guess it matters a ton because I think that that's probably the offensive role he'll end up playing most likely in the NBA. But I also think it's something he can learn how to do with just like practice and I think better guards.
Right.
As you mentioned. So, but like between Allen, Patton, even Bam Adebayo, Giles, we have Jonathan Motley higher than Anigbogu right now.
I have
like,
Motley
all of
at
those
34, so yeah.
Yeah, all of those guys just do more stuff on the floor, and I think are people you can project to give you some of the similar characteristics. They may not be elite level rim protectors, but they're going to bring so much more. Like with Motley, I think he's a much better passer than Anigbogu probably will ever be. And that's a useful skill for a big man.
Yeah, I think that like one of the things that goes super underrated for role players in the NBA is just like having game, like in general, just matters. Like, yeah. I know that like people think of these guys like playing a really limited role, but think back to like Tony Allen is the name that I always bring up. Tony Allen, I think, won the Big 12 Player of the Year and averaged like 16 points a game for Oklahoma State. Patrick Beverly was awesome at Arkansas. Andre Robertson was awesome at Colorado, like all Pac-12 level player. Name some other guys. Like who else is a really awesome role player in the NBA?
We talked about Ryan Anderson.
Yes.
As somebody who's a really good role player now.
Was great in the Pac-10.
Danny Green is a pretty good example, I think.
Yeah, developed his game over 4 years, got to the point where he became an elite shooter. He wasn't always a great shooter early in his career, but he had a lot more game off the dribble at North Carolina than I think he gets credit for now. Steven Adams, again, like showed a little bit more offensively in the post at Pitt. Then he gets to show, he showed it a little bit more this year, but like then he gets to show now.
Right.
So I think that like just generally having a high functional skill level, even just to keep defenses honest, is incredibly undervalued for role players looking forward in the NBA.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, they have to be, and I've started to think a little bit more in the context of the playoffs, maybe just because they're around, but it's like if you start to think about how some of these players are going to fit in those environments where teams tailor their strategies for you.
Yep.
Having the ability to do other stuff is really important. And at the top level of the draft, that's important for, say, Josh Jackson to develop his jump shot or to be a primary initiator, because otherwise teams just aren't going to guard him when it gets to the playoffs. And that really limits like a role that he can play on a good team. Yeah. And as you get lower into some of these role players, that stuff becomes important. It's why I really like Josh Hart. I think that he's a plug-and-play kind of guy where he can definitely shoot it a little bit. He, I think, can create a little bit of offense, and he's going to go out and compete and guard really hard on defense. It's why I like somebody like Sindarius Thornwell, who I think can go out and shoot it pretty well and is going to be a really good defender. Those kind of plug-and-play guys are really important, and I think if you have a project like Anigbogu who is going to come in and not be able to give you something offensively, he becomes much easier to defend and makes it much more difficult for your team, if you want your team to be a good team, to actually be a good team.
Well, and like also, I mean, he's going to be a guy that provides gravity by screening, right? Sure. And as we kind of just discussed, I don't know if he's going to do that all that well. So if he doesn't do that super well, then you're essentially not only hurting your center position production, but you're hurting your point guard and shooting guard position production as well, because those guys aren't going to be able to finish the rim as much if a guy like Anigbogu's defender isn't going to, follow him out into the lane or out of the
absolutely.
lane. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of where I fall on all of this. Anything else you want to talk about, Chris, while we're here?
Nothing that sticks out right now.
Is there anything? You're not going to be at the Combine, correct?
I am not going to be at the Combine.
So, is there anything you're looking forward to, I guess, is the question I have. Like, is there anything that, like, you're really kind of, trying to get a better feel for that you might be able to get at the Combine?
I mean, I think I am interested in what these wings will do, in large part because I'm wondering, maybe in part informed by Charks, whether or not I should reformulate some of the decisions I make on a big board regarding positional scarcity and how important these wings are. And maybe that's because I'm starting some research on a piece I'm going to write about the wings in the draft. But that's something I'm just really interested in, is to see how those guys test, to see how they play in 5-on-5, and to see if that sways me one direction or another.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, Chris. Tell me and tell the people where they can find you.
Sure. The best place to find me is on Twitter at CStoneHoops. All my draft work gets done for the Step Back over at FanSided. There's a bunch of awesome stuff over there. You had Cole Zwicker on recently. He's been doing some really awesome stuff. Trevor Magnotti does a bunch of awesome stuff for us and is one of the most tuned in kind of international guys that I know.
Yeah, everyone over there does a great job. I believe you guys are led by Ian Levy, too.
That is true.
Yeah, Ian also does great work. You should go follow Ian. You should follow Cole. You should follow Trevor. You should follow Chris, certainly. Above all of them, I would say, because Chris is the person who comes on this podcast the most. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. You can rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. It really helps us move up in the ratings. And, that stuff matters. It really helps us get the show out to more and more people. And come draft time, I think that there are going to be more people interested in something like this. So keep it locked here. You can follow me at Sam_Vicini. I have a really fun story coming on, I think, Wednesday or Friday on Vice. I'm not sure when yet. And yeah, just follow along on Twitter. We're going to have another show on Friday, probably from the NBA Draft Combine. We'll see who I can get to come on the show on Thursday afternoon. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.